class, we have a new social assignment today.
Another one?
Another one, yeah, another one, okay? So we have to learn about the Stone Age, trees to huts, Neanderthal man, and Cro-Magnon man. Okay, so the first people that are going to present in about like 3 weeks are going to be Mohona, Afnan, and Kevin. And if you want to qualify for exceeding, you can talk about, well, you have to talk about Homo sapiens. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Cro-Magnon man. Cro-Magnon man was discovered by workmen in 1868 in the village of Les Assises in France. It's a common name used to describe the first modern early man. The approximate age of the site is 30,000 years old. That's really long, okay? The site contained 5 skeletons, 3 adult males, 1 adult female, and 1 child, which had been buried there, along with stone tools, carved reindeer antlers, ivory pendants, and shells. The Cro-Magnon man lived in Europe between 35,000 and 10,000 years ago. They are almost physically identical to modern man, but taller, muscular, and slightly tougher, okay, on average than most humans. Their forehead was fairly straight rather than curved like Neanderthals. Their faces were short and wide. The chin was rather big, and brain capacity was larger than the average modern human.
They were skilled hunters, toolmakers, and artists, famous for the cave art at places such as Lascaux, Chabet, and Altamira. Cro-Magnon men had plenty of food and shelter, and from what we can tell, many of them lived long lives. Their diet was pretty varied. They ate the fruits, berries, nuts, seeds, and roots that they could gather, as well as the animals they could hunt. Fishing was done using spears, bow and arrow, nets, and even fish hooks. Some built canoes and rafts to go out into deeper water to catch larger fish. Hunters mostly went after herd beasts such as deer. Cro-Magnon was a good hunter and would take any animal they could, including saber-toothed tigers. They had bows and stone-tipped arrows, stone spears, stone knives, and axes. They learned how to smoke and preserve meat to help feed themselves during the cold winters.
During the summer months, they would follow the herds and hunt. During the winter, they returned to their winter camps. Cro-Magnon built 2 different types of houses. During the summer month, while following the herds, they lived in easy-to-pack and set up tents and teepees. During the winter months, they lived in larger, more permanent-type huts. The summer tents were easily set up by either stringing between 2 trees or covering some sticks, the teepee style, with the tanned hides of animals. The winter huts were usually in a permanent location and were much durable. They could be roomy enough for a family to stay in. They were also made with tanned hides that had been sewn together and wrapped around logs, which had been placed into holes that they dug. They had an opening in the top to let out smoke and were weighted at the bottom with rocks or dirt to keep them anchored down during storms.
Neanderthals are our closest extinct human relative. Some defining features of their skulls include the large middle part of their face, angled cheekbones, and huge nose humidifying and warming cold, dry air, like Nathan. But their brains were just as large as ours and often bigger. Proportionally to their brawnier bodies, Neanderthals made and used a diverse set of tools, controlled fire, lived in shelters, made and wore clothing, and were skilled hunters of large animals, and occasionally made symbolic ornamental objects. There is evidence that Neanderthals deliberately buried their dead and occasionally even marked their graves with offerings, such as flowers.
No other primates and no earlier human species had ever practiced this sophisticated and symbolic behavior. DNA has been recovered from more than a dozen Neanderthal fossils, all from Europe. The Neanderthal Genome Project is one of the exciting new areas of human origins research. Neanderthals are subspecies of archaic humans in the genus Homo that went extinct about 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals and modern humans share 99.7% of their DNA and are hence closely related. By comparison, both modern humans and Neanderthals share 98.8% of the DNA with their closest non-human living relatives, the chimpanzees.
Due to accumulating genetic and fossil evidence suggesting Neanderthals evolved in Europe separately from modern humans in Africa for over 600,000 years, paleontologists generally classified them as distinct species, Homo neanderthalensis. From the 1950s to the early 1980s, Neanderthals were widely considered a subspecies of Homo sapiens. Neanderthals were shorter than modern humans and had barrel chests, stocky limbs, and large noses, traits that were well suited to the frigid climes of Europe during the last ice age. Ancient DNA retrieved from the bones of two Neanderthals suggests that at least some of them had red hair with pale skin. This could be a sign of the starting point of diversity and DNA mutation.
Early men used clever ways to make many tools and weapons. An example is hand axes. The process started by them finding a large piece of rock. They later shaped the rock with a stone hammer. Using a hammer made of wood, stone, or antler, they sharpened the edges. Then last but not least, they trimmed the edges by prying off tiny flakes with a pointed stick. The Stone Age was a time in history where early man began to use stone as a tool or weapon. For example, a hand axe. It lasted from when the first stone tools were made, by our ancestors about 3.4 million years ago, until the introduction of metal tools a few thousand years ago. The Stone Age is divided into three periods. The Old Stone Age, called Paleolithic, lasted from the first use of stones until the end of the last ice age. The Middle Stone, called Mesolithic, lasted from the end of the last ice age until the start of farming. The New Stone Age, called Neolithic, lasted from the start of farming to the introduction of metal. As you can tell, each word ends with lithic. It is a Greek word meaning stone or rock. Have you ever wondered what early man ate?
For dessert, they would have honey taken from beehives, depending on the season. Hunter-gatherers would move around where the best hunting ground was. Humans who lived by the seas, rivers, or lakes used barbed spears to catch fish and also learned to build traps later on to catch lobsters, crab, and eels. So the Stone Age was a time in history where early man began to use stone as a tool or weapon. So they used it for hunting, defending themselves.
I know that early humans started to have religious beliefs as well during this time. While farming was becoming a thing, they made tombs for their ancestors. In 2015, about 100 tombs were found. These are called megaliths. Mega meaning big, and lithos meaning stone. They were found buried near the famous Stonehenge in England. Before that, hunters and gatherers tried to communicate with spirits through animals. Early man became aware of the seasons changing, and they made up stories explaining why the sun rose and set and why there was thunder and rain. They started worshipping these forces of nature. To keep their gods happy, they would perform rituals and ceremonies and give gifts. In the earliest prehistoric era, before man knew how to build shelters, they made use of the natural environment to provide them with shelter. The earliest forms of shelter were those in trees, where it would provide minimum protection against the searing heat of the sun and the cold of the rain. Also, trees protected man against animals that could not climb up trees. Another natural form of shelter was the cave, which provided greater protection against more bad weather. Later on, man went into caves when they learned how to use weapons and hunt animals. Before that, they didn't go into caves because a lot of big animals were already occupied in them. The first man-made shelter was believed to have been made out of stones and tree branches.
The stones were placed at the base of the structure to hold the branches in place. Man slowly learned to make simple tools that would allow them to build better structures, and later on these structures gradually evolved in shape and form. Other structures, which then provided much more stability, security, and comfort. Eventually, earth was taken from the ground and dried in the sun to form clay blocks, leading to the usage of bricks as the basic building blocks of shelter.
Very early humans learned to stay away from caves and shelters. Caves were often already occupied by dangerous animals. Instead, they looked for trees to climb on, or rocks and cliffs to shelter under. The discovery of fire had a huge impact on humans. Fire allowed them to pick where they camped. Animals were afraid of fire, and fire could be used to drive animals out of caves. From remains found, scientists have discovered that Neanderthals lived in caves and had fires in which they cooked their food. Neanderthals preferred caves as sleeping places and temporary homes. They were good hunters. They removed any dangerous animals and then moved in. Neanderthals, like other early people, were hunters and gatherers. They did not plant crops, and they gathered food instead and followed the herds. All human beings are a part of the Homo sapiens species. During the time of climate change, 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, like other early humans that are living at this time. Now modern humans are living around the world, everywhere, and yeah, they gathered and hunted food, and their behavior evolving helped them respond to the challenges of survival in unstable environments. Modern humans can generally be characterized because of their larger skull compared to other early humans like Neanderthals. Modern humans have very large brains, which vary in size from population to population and between males and females. But the average size is approximately 1,300 cubic centimeters.
Humans often consider themselves to be the dominant species on Earth and the most advanced in intelligence and ability to manage the environment. This belief is especially strong in Western culture and is based in part in the biblical creation story in which Adam is explicitly given dominion over the earth and all of its creatures. Biologists and scientists in general, though, do not consider dominant to be a useful term. From the scientific standpoint, Homo sapiens certainly is among the most generalized species on Earth. Smaller and simpler animals such as bacteria and insects greatly surpass humans in population size and diversity of species. But few single species occupy as many diverse environments as humans. Many other species are adapted to specific environments, whereas humans rely on tools such as clothing and manufactured shelter. The use of tools and the ability to alter the environment, building shelter, weaving clothing, language, and the development of social relationships and structures.